thought. But actually, I've asked them to lock the doors so we can, have an intimate conversation and discuss this all night long. I know you guys want to hang out with me. Anyways, my name is Carmen Summers. I'm a program manager on the System Center Virtual Machine Manager team. And I've been with the team for about 4 years. I've been with Microsoft for about 4 years. And basically, before I came to Microsoft, I worked for a large data center services company managing their global patch management operations for 40,000 servers. So my background is in the data center server space, and in particular, my expertise is in patch management of those servers. So I am super excited to stand up here today and talk to you about the part 3 of the server fabric lifecycle, which includes high availability, update management, and dynamic optimization. So just so I understand who went where this week, how many people were in part 1 of this? Wow, okay. How many people were in part 2? Okay. And I promise for those of you that were in part 2, I swear I got the clicker right this time. So let's get started. So today, when you walk away from here, and I know you really want to be here because this is the last session of the day, so thank you for coming out. For one, I wanted to just take the time to say that. I know that I thought I was going to be up here talking to the crickets. So I appreciate you coming out and spending the last session of the day with me, and I hope that it's worthwhile. And when you leave here today, I hope that you'll have a better understanding of our high availability features, and we'll talk about what those are. Talk about how we're doing patch management for the server fabric in VMM 2012. Talk about how we're doing dynamic optimization in 2012. And you'll understand how to create a Hyper-V cluster within VMM 2012. You understand how to update that cluster within VMM 2012, and then optimize it. So you've seen this slide. I'm not going to focus on it. I talked about it in my last session. But basically, what I want to focus on today is update management, dynamic optimization, power optimization, and cluster creation, which is really the second part of when you bare metal provision the host, or hosts in this case, and then you want to create a cluster out of them. So let's talk a bit about high availability in VMM 2012. Well, first let's talk about what the goals of it are. It's been a feature, it's been around since VMM 2008, and the main goal of high availability is to enable VMs to be highly available and easily migratable. So what does that mean, right? It means that if I lose a host, that the VMs will be able to migrate themselves. Doesn't mean that they won't sustain any downtime. It means that they will easily recover and move. Easily migratable means I want to be able to click a button and move this VM from one host to another. Easy. And that's the goal of high availability in VMM. We've come a long way in the way we do high availability. So with VMM 2007, we were pretty cluster agnostic. We didn't even know what a cluster was. People came to us and said, I have this cluster, but you just see it as 2 nodes, 2 computers. You don't show me that they share a relationship of any kind, that they're a managed object, a managed entity. And we only had support for virtual server, 2005, R2, SP1. So we took those requirements from customers. And we came out with VMM 2008. VMM 2008 added support for the ability to add and remove clusters in VMM. So what this meant, as opposed to them being single computers that we just saw as 2 individual objects, we now recognize the cluster object as an actual entity within VMM. We gave you the ability to create and delete high availability virtual machines on those clusters. And we gave you the ability to do quick land and overcommit on the cluster. Quick migration, land migration, and then overcommit on the cluster. And in 2008, we introduced support for Hyper-V, obviously the management tool, and VMware. So when Hyper-V came out with live migration, we introduced VMM 2008 R2, and we added more features. We introduced, and with VMM 2008 and Hyper-V, the initial version, you were tied one VM to one CSV volume. Customers didn't like that. That was a huge pain for people. And they said, you're just not cutting it. You need to come up to par. And I will say we introduced that, and we're well on our way to doing that. And with each iteration, we are evolving. So in VMM 2008 R2, we had the support for cluster share volumes. Now you could put a bunch of VMs on one CSV. You didn't have to create one VM per CSV any longer. We added intra-cluster migration. We added support for third-party CFS and storage. And we added support for Hyper-V R2, which enabled live migration. So in VMM 2012, we've gone a little further. Not only do we give you the ability to bare metal create your fabric servers, now we give you the ability to create and delete clusters. So we will actually create the cluster on your behalf from managed computers that you have within VMM. How many of you have tried VMM 2012 beta? Okay. How many of you have registered on Connect and have submitted bugs? Good. Good. I would just say that the product doesn't get better without you. So when you leave here, if you go home and you do nothing else, at least download it, give it a try. For those of you that haven't, I hope that you've learned how to, from this 3-part series, you should know everything you need to know to get your fabric up and running to enable cloud, to the private cloud, and then to enable services on top of that. So new investments in high availability. For those of you that went to the setup, deployment, and upgrade session yesterday, you know that VMM itself in the past was not highly available. And that's customers said to us, well, if you tell me to create a VM on a failover cluster and put VMM inside it, if the host fails or the node on the host fails, I'm still going to fail. It's not a highly available service, right? So we said, you're right. And we made VMM a highly available service on top of failover clustering. And this guarded against OS as well as VMM service failures. So now, when a node fails, VMM, because you're connected to the cluster service on that failover cluster, will reconnect itself. Virtual machines. In VMM 2012, you can now create non-HA virtual machines on clustered hosts. This was a limitation we had in VMM 2008. But when you create a non-HA VM on a clustered host, you cannot put it on the cluster storage. It has to be on non-clustered disks. You can create and delete highly available virtual machines on Citrix Zen Server. As you know, I think I pretty much beat Citrix Zen Server into the ground yesterday, so you guys all know about that. And I won't focus on that. Host clusters. Now you can add and remove Citrix Zen Server host clusters. You can add and remove Hyper-V clusters and untrusted domains. And, like I said, you can create a cluster. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. In VMM, we make it pretty simple for you to create it. But let's talk about why we did it. Because a lot of people said, well, I have that capability in failover cluster. Why are you doing this? But a lot of customers said to us, I just want to be able to do, I use VMM, and that's what I use. And I don't want to have to use any other tool. I want a bare metal provision from you. I don't want to have to use SCCM to bare metal provision, then go over to Cluster Manager and create it out of Cluster Manager, and then add it into you. So that's 3 tools I have to use to just be able to bring up a host. I don't want to do that. You know, and frankly, I don't want to do that either. I want to be able to use one single pane of glass. And so what we did was we worked with the cluster team, and we said, we just want to create a very specific experience around creating Hyper-V clusters. So our experience is only gauged around creating Hyper-V clusters, and it's a specialized experience. So you can now bare metal provision, and you can actually automate this entire process with PowerShell, because our entire UI is built on PowerShell. So if I wanted to kick off the entire creation process of a bare metal deployment using out-of-band discovery, bare metal creation, provisioning out 2 servers, and then creating a cluster out of those, I could script the entire thing and run it. So we have a wizard-based experience for creating clusters. It's a very simple wizard. I'm going to show it to you here in a couple seconds. We're going to run through creating it. What we do for you on your behalf is we run through the cluster validation. So when you tell us, make these 2 VMs, make these 2 hosts a cluster, we take and we add them into VMM. Well, they're already added into VMM, but we basically allocate the cluster disks if we're managing the storage. So if we're managing the storage and you've assigned the array and we're managing it, and you've assigned the array and the LUNs to the host group, we will automatically unmask that based upon what you tell us. We'll show you the disk groups, the LUNs that are available, and during the cluster creation wizard, we'll allow you to pick the disks that you want associated with that particular cluster. We will also, on your behalf, so you know how you have to create the external virtual networks on each node of the cluster, and you have to go around and do that manually? It's a big pain in the butt, right? And we do it for you. So you pick a common network, and we'll go ahead and create that, the virtual switches on your behalf. Yay! Anyways, I usually get a clap out of that. Are you guys tired? How many of you thought it was a pain to do that? Yeah, thank you. It is a pain. So, and last but not least, then we run the cluster validation. So some people have said to me, what if I want to skip cluster validation? What if I don't want to do that? Because you know what? It takes a long time to go through the validation wizard, especially if you're creating an 8-node cluster, right? We don't allow you to deviate. You take the hit. We would invalidate your support if we did that for you. So basically, the first thing you would do, if the cluster didn't create, we allow you to skip the validation wizard. You come and you call CSS, and the first thing they're going to ask you to do is, well, what's your cluster validation report say? So we don't skip that. You take the hit up front. It takes a while. It just depends. So that's just so you know the reasoning and the ask that people have asked us for. It's not very common that people want to skip that, but sometimes in lab environments when they pretty much are deleting and recreating clusters all the time, you know, it gets to be a bit of a burden on them because they know that it will succeed. And in that case, you know, it can save them a lot of time. So for management, we will still allow you to add clusters that you create outside of us. So if you are using VMM 2008 today, and the beauty of VMM 2012 is that we'll allow you to use 2012 just like you did in VMM 2008 if you want to. And then when you're ready to enable the advanced features of bare metal deployment, cluster creation, and then cloud, and then service creation. When you're ready for those features, you can evolve into it. It's not like an all or nothing. So we've spent a lot of time ensuring that the functionality, the scripts that you have today written in VMM 2008, they all work. They will all work, still work in VMM 2012. So you can, when you add and remove clusters, we allow you to add and remove clusters. If we've created the cluster, we will go ahead and unmask all the storage for you, but we won't destroy the nodes. They will still be managed managed hosts within VMM. So we would just uncluster, and we would just take back the storage if we were managing the storage. Of course, if you didn't assign the storage to the cluster through us, then you would have to mask the storage again. Take it back. Like I said, when we delete clusters, you can delete clusters. We will uncluster and leave them in VMM. It's up to you to then delete the managed objects, which is the host. So the cluster creation wizard, this is for your reference, because a lot of you are going to go home and review this, and you're going to have these decks available to you. And it's not in the add resources area that you go and you create a cluster. It's actually in the create ribbon. So we're going to go and we're going to simulate and run through this so that you understand how to create a cluster. I will say that I'll kick off the job, but it will take forever, and it will not finish by the time we're done here today. But if you guys want to hang out with me, we'll wait around, and we'll see if it finishes. So let's go and let's create a cluster, run through the wizard. Just let me get this here, switch over. Oh. There we are. It's really hard to see up here because the lights are shining in my eyes, so I cannot even see the letters. So while I'm not having button difficulty any longer, now I'm having difficulty seeing. So here's my environment. I think I showed you, this is not the same environment I showed you yesterday. This is an environment that I have 2 candidates for a cluster. The nodes must be within the same host group. We define a lot of settings on those host groups. Let's take a look at that. You see here, I have some storage on this host group. You can see here I have total capacity. I have a storage pool. I don't know why my storage pool is not showing up, but I do have some storage that VMM is managing. And I've made it available to this host group, and you'll actually be able to see it when I go to create the cluster. So I go up here to create. I'm in the fabric pane, by the way. Create Hyper-V cluster. I give it a name. I type in some credentials. We'll use mine. Yes, we've made a change. So everywhere right now where you see the prompting for credentials, when we release later this year, we will also give you the ability to use run as accounts everywhere. So there was some inconsistency in the way we did accounts, and it was identified through our customers who were using the beta, and they said, you need to make it available everywhere, so we did. You won't see it in this because this is actually the beta build. So I'm going to pick the Las Vegas host group, and it's going to tell me I have 2 standalone hosts that I can then make into a cluster. I'm going to select those, and I'm going to add them over here. If I had 10, I could add those into, it just doesn't matter. So here is where I see the storage that's been made available to these hosts. You can see here that I have a 9 gig, a 20 gig CSV volume. It's been formatted with NTFS. Oh, it's not CSV. I thought it was. It's been formatted to NTFS, and I have a 9 gig or 10 gig other storage. So what VMM does on your behalf is we have to have a witness disk. So by default, when we are given a group of disks, we will pick the smallest one to be the witness disk. And that's automated, and you can't change it. So know when you're making a storage available to your hosts that we will automatically pick a witness disk on your behalf. And here's where I can also choose to format, quick format. I can select if there's a CSV volume. I believe this is it is a CSV volume. I have to tell it it's a CSV volume, which I'm not sure why. And then here, this is all the networks, all the logical networks that are defined in VMM that are tied to physical adapters on those hosts. And these are all the networks that are common among these nodes. So I'm not going to select this because I'm just going to be forefront with you. There's a bug in this UI. So I'm not going to select this today. But if I were to select this, I would give the external network a name, and it would automatically create it on my behalf. There's been one created in the background for me, so I don't have to do this. See this? This is a bug, sorry. And I'm going to click Finish, and the job's going to kick off. And you can see here, we'll go to the Jobs view. And so what is it doing during this time? Can everybody see this? Yeah, I think you can. So we're going to validate the OS requirements on each node. We're going to validate the domain memberships of each node. We're going to go through and we're going to enable failover clustering on each node. We're going to unmask the selected resources to the nodes if it's not already done for you. If you did it inside of VMM, we have to unmask it. So if it's VMM managed storage, we will unmask it for you. We're going to create the external virtual networks. We're going to then run, after that's done, the cluster validation report. We're going to create the quorum. And finally, we're going to, for each logical unit that's designated, and as a CSV, we're going to, for each logical unit that was designated as a CSV volume, we will make it such. A CSV volume within Cluster Manager. And after that completes, we will have a fully functioning cluster within VMM. You can see here that this job is progressing along. And now it's on step, we can expand this out. And it's now getting ready to validate the nodes for clustering. And like I said, that's going to take a while. And my job failed. I was hoping I would not have that happen. So let's switch back over to the slides. And more than likely, my cluster validation report did not succeed. There was something wrong. So people ask, well, once it fails, and I have a job that fails, and I get this error, for instance, like this, failed to connect to the service manager on the cluster candidate. So evidently, I'm having some RPC errors. Refer to the cluster documentation to resolve this issue. Well, what happens if the cluster validation report fails? Can I view it in here? No, you can't. But we do give you a direct link and a direct visibility into being able to see that report. So you still have to go outside of us to see it. If you'd like to see it within VMM, get on Connect and file the bug. It was a change that didn't quite make it in, but if it's something that's you're passionate about and it's something you like to see because it helps you troubleshoot, because part of what we want to do here is make it easy for you to troubleshoot VMM and things that go wrong outside of VMM and not have to refer to another Hyper-V Manager console or a Cluster Manager console when things don't go right in VMM. So if it's something you'd like to see, we would appreciate the feedback because that helps us determine what's important to you. So let's move on to update management. Update management is a brand new feature in VMM 2012. It is not a brand new feature to Microsoft. Again, I want to be clear here as to why we're doing this and who we designed this feature for. We have a group of customers that come to us and say, you know what, I have another patch management product in my environment that I use for my server workloads, but for my Hyper-V clusters, I patch those manually. In fact, how many of you patch your Hyper-V clusters manually today? Yeah, It takes you a while, doesn't it? You got to migrate off the workload, then you got to patch the node yourself, put it in maintenance mode, put it in operations manager maintenance mode, patch it, then go to the next node. You do all the orchestration manually, and you do it every single month, right? So for those customers, which is the large majority of people in this room, we are going to enable you to do Hyper-V cluster orchestration and patch those clusters in an automated manner. We also heard from customers, and they said to us, you know what, I'm a server. I patch servers. I don't patch desktops. And I have a customer that, say for instance, I'll just give you an example, GM OnStar. They have thousands of servers in the data center, in a data center. And you know what? I can't just send out a deadline to those servers and hope it goes. I have to watch and see what happens. I have to control when those servers are being patched. I have to determine that. I cut the chain record, I secure the window, and then I'm the one who says, yep, you're back up and running. The service is back up and running. And with some patching products, you don't always get the ability to see that. In order for you to see what's happening, you have to pull a report. So what we wanted to do is enable those server admins to be able to see exactly what was happening, to be able to have maximum control over when you patch a server that is part of your VMM fabric. So the VMM fabric, what does that consist of? It consists of your hosts, your standalone hosts, your host clusters, your library server, your WSUS server, which we call an update server, your Pixie server, or your WDS server, or the VMM server itself. Next thing you're going to ask me is, well, when you patch clusters, do you patch the VMM, highly available VMM service? And I will say for this version, we do not. We patch Hyper-V clusters, so for the VMM highly available, for the highly available VMM, you'll have to do the orchestration yourself for patching, but we do give you the ability to patch it through VMM. So that's one limitation. Something you'd like to see us do. Get on Connect. Use this feature. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. So just a basic run through of what we're going to go through with patch management. I'm going to walk you through the entire life cycle of how to get through, of how to enable this feature and how to make it work. So the first thing we need to do is we need to enable the feature. We're going to do a whole slide on how we enable it and what we depend upon. Next thing you know, next thing you want to do is once you get it enabled and you have a catalog of updates, you're going to create some baselines. Baselines consist of, it's a group of updates assigned to specific host groups or particular objects, and we'll talk about what those are. Then you're going to want to go out and you're going to want to scan the servers. Everything's on demand in our console. Then you're going to want to remediate the servers, and that's what we call install updates. And there are times where you're patching servers and a patch fails, or it brings the server down. And so typically what you do is you go out and you roll that patch back. You find out what's wrong, you roll it back. And then within your tool, you kind of keep in your head, okay, well, I can't really put that patch on that server. I need an exemption, but I have no way to make it exempt from the policy without taking it out of being accountable to the policy. And so what that creates is you maintaining a spreadsheet to say, oh, yeah, I have this server, I had to take it out of this particular collection or this particular group because it couldn't exempt itself from a particular patch for that policy. But I still want it to be accountable, so I still need to account for that when I'm doing reporting to my corporate information security office who manages, who's tracking compliance for all vulnerabilities within my data center. So what exemptions give you the ability to do is do just that. And I'm going to talk about in detail what that does. So the first thing you want to do in order to do patch management with VMM 2012 is you want to point us to an update server. What we rely on is a WSUS server 3.0 64-bit server. You have to install it outside of us, and you have to configure it outside of us, meaning you have to configure the product classifications, the products, the languages, the proxy settings, so on and so forth. So why didn't we enable that and make it easy for you to do that? We wanted to. And I think in the next version, we are seriously considering that, because right now, we can enable the WSS role in Windows 2008 R2, but you still have to interactively go through the configuration. There's no way to programmatically do a silent install of the installation of WSS, the configuration part. So even if you use SCCM today and you set up WSS outside of the SCCM, you still have to go, you actually have to go through that configuration through their wizard, and then they set it for you. So essentially, when you're in SCCM, they tell you to install the engine part, and then when the configuration part comes up, you cancel out of it. We thought it was a bit of a disjointed experience, just simply because most people they read the documentation, but they were in a wizard, so they were going through it and they just configured it all, and then when they added it into SCCM, they had to do it, the configuration again. So we decided to eliminate that and say just configure it completely outside of us. You notice here that we say we require a dedicated root WSS server. That is true for beta, but that is not true for RTM. We will enable you to share a WSS server between SCCM and SCVMM. So what sharing means, we're planning on it. So, and when I say plan, it's strong indication that it will happen, but just so you know, we are planning on that. And when I say sharing, I mean we coexist. You as the Fabric admin, you'll manage your patches. We, SCCM and SCVMM, how many of you, just so I understand, how many of you use SCCM in your data centers today for patching? Okay, so this is relevant to this room. I just want to make sure that if I'm talking about this, that it applies to some people in this room. The way we manage patches and the way SCCM uses WSUS and the way we use it are entirely different. Not entirely, but somewhat different. They use it for the metadata, the catalog that we sync down from the WooMoo in the internet. That's what we do. We pull that through WSUS. They use the Web Services API they made available through WSUS. They use the WUA agent in order to scan applicability of those approved patches or of the patches that are downloaded from WSUS. By default, in WSUS, everything is improved for scan, but not install. They do not use WSUS for content distribution, meaning that SCCM distributes its own content, has software distribution points, they do all the work themselves. They do not use it for the EULA acceptance. They have their own mechanism within SCCM to do that. SCVMM, on the other hand, does use it for content distribution and does use it for EULA acceptance. We use the entire Web Services API that they provide and all the functionality it provides and the WSUS infrastructure to be able to provide the binaries to the managed hosts. So what we needed a way to do was isolate ourselves, and we're doing that. We're going to isolate ourselves so that we can coexist with SCCM and enable you to share the same WSUS server. Because as you know, we only patch the server fabric. So if you're patching VMs, which are servers, you'll be still doing that in SCCM. And your business owners or whoever those people are that you provision out servers to will still be able to have their content downloaded from a shared WSUS. If you are installing WSUS on a remote server, you'll have to install the WSUS console on the VMM server. And the reason is that that's how they provide their SDK. So in order for VMM to be able to talk to the remote WSUS server, we require their console installed on the VMM server so that we can enable the communication via their SDK, the Web Services API, to talk to the WSUS server. We also support WSUS in SSL mode. How many of you use WSUS in SSL mode? Okay, that's pretty indicative of the feedback we've gotten. So what happens is that when you install WSUS outside of us, and then you go and add it into VMM, it's a simple dialogue. We take over the management of WSUS at that point. So today in beta, when you add VMM and we integrate in, we import all the settings, we take over the configuration, so at that point you should never need to go back into WSUS to manage anything. We take it over. Now in the case where you're using WSUS to manage desktops as well, the changes that we're taking to support shared WSUS with SCCM will also enable you to continue supporting your desktops with WSUS. In that case, you'll have to figure out who's going to be the authoritative source, because we think we control WSUS and WSUS thinks it controls itself. And in that case, you'll have to just decide who's going to be the authoritative source. You can and will be able to put WSUS or VMM configuration settings for WSUS into read-only mode, so that it's just an import and you can read it. So with SCCM, you'll also want to decide who's going to be the authoritative source for configuration. So we get a catalog based upon the product classifications and the languages and everything like that that you set. We import all those into a big catalog. How many of you use WSUS for patching today? Just straight WSUS, no SCCM? Okay, good. You use it for your servers? Yes? Okay. And so you have to do that kind of manually, right? You let it download and you... Are they production servers? Okay. So VMM points to... VMM, once you point a baseline, which we're going to talk about here, to VMM managed servers will automatically configure the WUA agent to point to us. So unlike in WSUS, you have to use GPO or the local registry settings to be able to point the WUA agent to the right place. And we will take care of that on your behalf if we are managing those servers with VMM patching. So let's talk about baselines. Out of the box, we create 2 baselines for you to help you get started. And baselines are simply, it's an object that basically contains a group of updates and a set of assignments. The set of assignments, you're telling us, I want you to be assigned, say for instance, I have a security patching, and all my servers in the data center need to be able to assess themselves against this security baseline to determine if they need this patch or this set of patches, if they're applicable one, and the next step is if it's installed or not. So these baselines give you the granular ability to be able to say, I want to focus on these set of updates, because there's 22,000 updates in WSUS. It's a lot of updates. And in your data center, you typically want to control what goes on those boxes, and you want to limit the risk of what's going to bring your servers down. You want to limit the risk to what you've already tested, right? And you do it. And when you get your baseline, you can assign it to all your servers. Say, for instance, you can assign it to all hosts, which means that all hosts and all host groups will automatically, when they're created, will get this baseline assigned to them. Or if you had, say, for instance, a baseline that you got a fix for an incident with Hyper-V, and it was a critical fix. And most people, and I will not quantify this, but there are a large majority of people that focus only on security updates in the data center because that's what they're mandated to do. They do critical fixes for incident response, like Microsoft told me to put this patch on there because it fixed this issue. They're very risk adverse. So in that case, they'll create a separate baseline for critical fixes and put a small majority and assign it to a particular, you can be very granular about how you assign it. You can assign it to a host group, or you can actually assign it to an individual computer. So a computer will grade itself against and the compliance state of the computer will be the aggregate of the baseline's compliance. So if computer 1 has baseline 1 and baseline 2, and baseline 1 is non-compliant, but baseline 2 is compliant, the aggregate of that is that the object is non-compliant. So I'll show you this here in just a second. We create, just to get back on the 2 sample baselines we create, so when you integrate with WSUS and you go into the library, you see the catalog, you'll see under baselines for the very first time 2 out-of-the-box baselines. One, based upon the security updates. So if you've selected the security classification, we will create an out-of-the-box baseline to help you get started that contains all the security updates that we knew about at that point. Granted, you don't have to create 16 different baselines. You can just create one baseline and keep adding to it, and the computers will assess themselves. So unlike maybe in another product, you're creating a update list every month and assigning it to a collection. You don't have to do that here. You essentially just keep adding to the baseline, and it'll determine whether it needs it, whether it doesn't need it, and you just keep adding to it, because we use the intelligence built into the WUA agent on each host, which is part of Windows, to determine applicability of that baseline. These sample baselines, they are one time out of the box. They are not dynamic, they're static, so they are just there to help you get started. All they do is contain the updates. You have to then assign them to something and rename them and make them your own. After that point, after you take them over, you manage them, you create them, you care for them, you feed them. Kind of like your new puppy. So, assigning a baseline, we kind of already covered this. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. So, we do not assign baselines to virtual machines. You can assign baseline to a virtual machine if it is running a VMM server role, library server, Pixie server, WSUS server, VMM server itself. Virtual machines that do not have a managed computer, a managed agent on them, that do not perform some sort of role for VMM are not patched. This feature is basically designed for VMM fabric servers. So scanning. After you assign a baseline, the machines will be in what we call an unknown compliance state. And I'm going to show you all this in the demo. I'm going to talk a bit about the unknown compliance state. What this state means is that I know I have a baseline assigned to me. Let's say I'm the computer. I have a baseline assigned to me, but I have not assessed myself against that baseline. I know that I should. So you as the administrator now go out and select that object and say, scan. It on demand goes down, clicks, selects, pokes the WUA agent on the managed object. That managed object then goes up to WSUS and says, hey, what do I need to scan myself against? It scans itself against what are approved within the baseline. It delivers the information back down. That information is then delivered to VMM, and VMM filters and gives you a compliance state. It also tracks the job, it also lets you know the status, and it is incremental, meaning that we will track the status of this job, and you will know explicitly how long it has to go. The first time a machine ever scans itself against the baseline is a full scan. Every iterative scan after that is a differential, so they tend to be very fast. It is also automatable through PowerShell. So remediation. The goal of remediation is to bring myself into compliance with missing updates. What's cool about what we do in VMM is that while I have a baseline that maybe there's 10 patches that I need to put on this, but say, for instance, I have a code red type patch, and I only want to focus on that particular patch. How many of you have been around long enough to know about code red or lived during that? June 2001? Yeah, me too. It was not fun. I spent many nights on that data center floor, and it was not fun. So the beauty is that you can be very granular. You don't have to assign a separate baseline. When you get up the remediation dialog, you can actually, it's going to tell you, I want to bring myself into compliance with this entire baseline. But you can say, nope, I just want you to focus on this one little update, because I've been told that within the next 24 hours, I've been approved for this particular update. So you can be very granular about what you bring into compliance, when, and how. Everything in our system is on demand. So when I keep saying that, you guys know that there is no scheduling mechanism within VMM today, right? Okay, in VMM 2 2012, there is also no scheduling mechanism. So how are you going to schedule patches if you want to schedule them? The beauty of System Center Orchestrator is that it will enable us to write workflows to it has a scheduling mechanism and it works cross-product. So we will be able to, you can actually use that to do some scheduling. But this is a very limited environment. Most people want to have maximum control over it. If you really need robust scheduling and you are using SCCM today and you like the way you patch with SCCM in your servers, continue to do so. It has very rich reporting. It has robust scheduling. It just doesn't have the orchestration. But you can certainly write an orchestrator workflow that would enable that. We wanted to provide an easy way out of the box to be able to do this, but it's an on-demand sort of mechanism. You can also script this. Everything in our UI is scriptable, so this is something that I could script, put in a workflow, an orchestrator, when it finally comes out in 2012, along with us, and make sure that, use their scheduling mechanism to run this every single month. And technically, because it's a Hyper-V cluster with live migratable VMs, you could technically patch a cluster without bringing, without bringing down the workload. So then you think, well, do I really need to cut a change ticket, right? Because technically, the VM workload should never go down. I will tell you today that you're going to want to cut a change record, even if the VM workloads don't want to go down, just for notification purposes to your data center, to your customers, and you're still going to want to do this during a maintenance window because of your SLAs. But technically, the VM should never go down. So it's for notification purposes. You'll be able to track the progress of installation. At any given time, you'll know exactly and explicitly where it is in that remediation process. You have a compliance view within VMM. And the value add, the big bang feature is that you can now orchestrate the patching of a Hyper-V cluster. So what that does for you and the way it works is, and we did work with the clustering team on this, and we are following best practices. And I will tell you that when we patch a Hyper-V cluster, we try to do it in the safest manner. Safe meaning that the workflow that we have, it's not a workflow, but the orchestration that we provide does the nodes one node at a time. So essentially what happens is that I select a cluster, I tell it to remediate, I tell it to bring itself into compliance. And what happens is that we go out and we look at the cluster. We say, are all the objects in the cluster, all the nodes in the cluster, are they in OK status? Are they good to go? And if they are, then we go to the next step. And then we do a check for maintenance mode. If any one node in that cluster is in maintenance mode, we'll fail the job and say, you had a node in maintenance mode. So some people say, well, it's OK to have a node in maintenance mode because I know my cluster can sustain a second node out of the cluster. So in the remediation dialog, you'll see here in just a second, we actually give you the ability to say, if you find a node in maintenance mode, only one node in maintenance mode at the beginning of this, go ahead. Because I know it's your choice. I know that my cluster can sustain 2 nodes out of it. But that's an explicit decision by you. We also give you the ability to not reboot. And I will say it's not best practice to not reboot. You should always reboot. It puts the machine in a very bad state when you don't reboot, when you're patching. But I will say that even in my past experience, there have been times where I have been told, you can patch that, but you can't reboot till 2 hours from now. So I know many of us have been in that situation, and customers ask for it, so it is in there. Once we make sure the cluster's OK, once we check for maintenance mode, we then go out and we pick the first node we come to, and we migrate off, live migrate up all the VMs. We do this with a feature that's available in VMM 2008 R2 and SP1 today called maintenance mode. So we ride on top of maintenance mode. Maintenance mode itself live migrates off the machine, puts the host into maintenance mode. Unlike in VMM 2008, we didn't pause the cluster node in VMM 2008 with maintenance mode. But in VMM 2012, in maintenance mode, we actually do pause the cluster node. So it will not be available for placement, and it's a pause node. Once maintenance mode succeeds and the VMs are all live migrated off, we go ahead and send down the patches that are explicit to the baseline that you've told us you want on that box. We do only what you have told us to do. And once that's done, we take the node out of maintenance mode, we check the cluster service, make sure everything's okay, and we move to the second node. And we repeat the same process until we go to the very end and we finish the last one. So at the very end of that, I bet you're asking, do you move the VMs back when you finish? Nope, we don't. Do you know why? That's right. I love that. So yes, if you have dynamic optimization set to automatic, we will detect that that cluster needs to be rebalanced, and we will take care of it for you. So it should kick in within 10 minutes of that cluster being remediated. We support Windows 2008 and Windows 2008 R2 clusters. However, with Windows 2008 clusters, you only get the ability to save state VMs. So it really doesn't do you any good. Everything's automatable through PowerShell. And exemptions. And then we're going to get to the demo, which is the coolest part. So exemptions. We talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to tell you what this looks like. So I have a BIOS line. It's assigned to a host group. I had a problem with the patch. It brought down one of my servers. I went out to that server, I uninstalled the patch, brought the server back up. I scanned the server. I don't even have to scan it. I know there's a problem with the patch, right? So I select that particular patch on that particular computer that's assigned via, let's say, the security baseline, and I say, make yourself exempt. And I put in my notes. Usually it's a business case justification from a change record that I have in my data center where my security guy says, okay, you have a 30-day exemption because until you figure out what's wrong with this, but it needs to be on there. So what's nice about this is that once I hit add and that exemption's on there, no matter what, until that exemption is removed, VMM will not allow that patch to be put on that system, but it will report. When in reporting in the console, it will tell you that I have a patch that's exempt on me. I'm compliant, but I have an exemption. So it enables you through to basically report up to track what exemptions you have in your data center, which makes your security compliance tracking much easier. So you don't have to change separate spreadsheets. It also eliminates human error. So say, for instance, you have a junior operator who's going out there and doing patches, and he didn't know that patch 1.2.3.4 was exempt, and it brought down the system, and he accidentally said, just bring yourself into compliance with the baseline. Without exemptions, we'd bring down that server again. But the beauty of this is that I can tell that server, bring yourself into compliance, and I'll put everything on there besides what I've told it not to. But I'm still accountable to that baseline, and when that business owner finishes fixing or we figure out the problem, I take off the exemption, I patch it up, and it's good to go. So let's, without further ado, patch a cluster. Are you ready? Okay, it's exciting, I know. I get excited about it, so. Okay, so here's the way the demo is going to work. And this is why. I'm going to kick off the job, and I'm going to show you how the steps it's going to take, and then I'm going to switch over to a video. And do you know why? Because it takes a while. And this job, I want you to be able to watch it. I want you to be able to see the whole flow, and I've time-lapsed the video so you can actually see it from end to end. And I think that that's really valuable. We could still watch this, but I want to time-lapse it so you can actually see it move from node to node. So let's just walk through a few things before we do this. So I'm going to show you here's where you find the update server. Like I've talked about yesterday, all managed computers are now in this view, so you can patch all these guys. So you basically are the owner of your infrastructure now when it comes to patches. Click on Update Server. you can actually see in the fabric view, this is the WSUS server. We call it an update server. We only integrate with one root server. So if you had a multiple root servers for one VMM server, you should not need to do that because one VMM server can manage up to 400 hosts, and one WSUS server can manage up to 20,000 machines. So you should never need more than one root server. But here you can see all the details of this particular root server. You can see that the agent status, we put an agent on there. We don't use the agent for much because, like I said, we're talking over the WSUS API, the Web Services API. So our agent is basically enables us to do some patching on that particular server. We also add a computer. We also add our computer account into the administrator's group. You can see the last time I synchronized WSUS. So everything is on demand in our console. So when you're ready to sync the catalog, say for instance Microsoft releases patches on the second Tuesday of every month, and I think we have one on the second and third something every month now, but you go out and you synchronize your catalog to bring in everything so you can actually tell the last sync. So notice here it failed because I'm in an isolated environment. But so initially, you cannot have a WSUS that's not talking to the internet. It has to be able to talk to the WUMU catalog in order to do synchronization. So you can see here that the last time it did sync, though, because what I did was I created this, I synced it, and then I pulled it out just so I'd have a catalog. It downloaded 209 new updates. There was 7 expired updates. This is all data that you normally see within WSUS itself. And over here, it'll show you like the last job that ran on it, like if I patched it itself and its compliance status. And so I can actually go in here and configure. It's a bug. Go to the fabric. Do you guys like that I'm pointing out bugs for you? I shouldn't do that. So here's where I would manage the configuration settings on WSUS. I could go and enable new product classifications. I can go in and enable new products. And as part of the synchronization is when Microsoft adds new products, you will automatically see them in here. So we actually suck in the data from WSUS. So the way the synchronization works is we go out, we tell WSUS to synchronize, it pulls down the catalog, and then VMM, once that job is done, pulls in all the new data, the differential data. And you can select languages, so I'm not going to make any changes here because I can't sync and I have no control of it right now. So if you want to synchronize, you have to do it through the fabric, and you do it right here. You can also select, right-click here, and, oh, no, you can't. Oh, shoot, should have done that. Sorry, a little trigger happy. Okay, once it's synchronized, now here in the library is where we have the update catalog. You see, here's the 2 baselines I told you about. You can see that each of these baselines has one assignment. Let's take a look at those. Here's all the updates. And these are updates that are part of this baseline. I can add more updates from my catalog. I forgot to show you the catalog, which I'll go back here. Add more updates. I can pick and choose the ones. I can sort. I can sort by KB article. I can sort by MSRC number. I don't know why it's not sorting. I can sort by release date. And say, okay, now here's where I go to do assignments. I can assign this particular baseline to all hosts, meaning everything that lives under all hosts will always get it, an example of a security baseline. Or I can be very granular, which I've done in this example, about who I want it to be assigned to. I can actually assign it to, this is the cluster, and these are the nodes within the cluster. We recommend that each node in the cluster have the same baselines assigned to it, and that you keep the patches exactly the same on each node in the cluster. It's best practices. And here you can see that here's the view script. If I wanted to change a baseline, I can also script that and save it in my library. Everything within our UI, every wizard. And you can see that in here you get the details of there are 129 updates in this particular baseline, and it has one assignment. And it was created on this. So actually this is being removed. There is no owner delegation in VMM 2012 for baselines. So because only administrators can do patching, administrators and delegate administrators. Here's the update catalog, and if you use WSUS, you're familiar with how this looks. This is, and we create these based upon the security classifications based upon the classifications that you tell us to. We create these folders on your behalf, and you can actually do the research just like you do in VMM. In WSUS, all the metadata is there that you would see normally in WSUS, and it looks very, very similar to WSUS. We aren't reinventing the wheel here. We don't want to create a different experience for you. We want you to use something that's familiar when it comes to the update catalog. So now, I've assigned this baseline to my Hyper-V cluster, and you can see in here, well, how do I see how to manage patches in this environment? In the fabric space is where you would do bare metal provisioning, you'd update the agent, you do all that. And this is a show. It's called the fabric show. If I want to do patching, I switch over to the compliance view. It gives you very rich experience about seeing what is on those servers and what's not in terms of patching. It also gives you a bit of a different view. It gives you a compliance status for the computers, which is right here. It'll also give you an operational status, which means that if I'm remediating or scanning, or I'm requiring a reboot, or I have a baseline that's assigned to me, that's in an unknown status, it will tell you, hey, you need to scan me. That's why I'm in unknown status. If you change a baseline or add or remove patches to a baseline, the machines will go into unknown status, because while we may know the status of particular updates within that baseline, we don't know the aggregate of the total compliance because we've never determined applicability for the new ones that you've added. When you delete, actually, we know that. We won't put it into unknown status. It's only when you add patches to a baseline that will put them into unknown status that will make you have to trigger a scan, and then you can go out and cut your change records from there to be able to say, hey, I'm going to put these patches on this server this month. So you can see here that this is a cluster, and in here I have 2 baselines that are assigned to it, and I can actually expand this, and I can see explicitly what is installed on this box right from the console. And you can see that this baseline is non-compliant, and this one is. And so if I expand this, it'll show me all the patches that were within this baseline, and whether there may be 100 patches in this baseline, but only these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were applicable to it when it was found during the scan. And only these show that they were either installed or not installed. So if it was not installed, it would be showing as non-compliant. So these 2 baselines, both the security baselines in this case for these 2 nodes, are non-compliant. We're going to bring those into compliance. I want to talk to you real quick about how we scan. So essentially, the scanning operations are just right here. You select the object. You can actually select a bunch of objects all at once and say scan, and it will scan them all. It'll tell you. It's very fast. It's differential. It'll come back immediately. If there's no changes to the baseline, you don't have to know that. You can actually see right here in the UI when the last scan was. And you can actually see the role of this server from this view as well. And that takes particular interest because sometimes a server can be a library server and a host at the same time. Or it could be a VMM server, a WSUS server, a Pixie server, a domain, all those things all in one. So it's key information for you to know. If I select a node within this cluster and say remediate, I want to show you what happens. It tells me, hey, this baseline is non-compliant and you need this patch, 964 or 2419640. So you see I get no cluster options, because in this case, it's not a cluster. It's a standalone computer. So if you select an individual node, we'll treat it like an individual node for patching. You can patch it, but we're not going to live migrate off the workload for you. In order for you to get the cluster capability of orchestration, you need to select the cluster object itself within the compliance view in the Fabric workspace. Select Remediate. And I'm going to be very granular about what I patch here. You see, these 2 guys, they don't match. This isn't my data center. I can tell you that, because in my data center, these guys would match. I'm going to put the same patch on each one of these guys. 964. See, it's when I need to find something, I can't find it. Okay, what's the KB article? 2419640. Let's give it one more try. 2419640. It's a secure 241. And shout. You see it? Okay. All the way at the top? Oh, that's the other server. That's that one. We need the one below it. 961, 261. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so in here, I've said that I want to put this patch on this node and this patch the same on this node. So at that point, I still end up with a state where this node will be out of compliance, but I only got approval for those two. You can see here that because this is a Windows 2008 R2 cluster, it's going to tell you the default migration method that it's going to select is live migration. Customers asked us to be able to do save state for it. I don't know why, and we took the change because maintenance mode already supports it. So there are some customers that want to do it. In particular, it was our own internal customer that asked for that. Can I get questions at the end, if you don't mind? I only got 8 minutes left, and I want to respect your time. So allow remediation of the clusters in maintenance mode of the nodes. So if I already have one node in maintenance mode, this allows me to bypass it. And then I can say do not restart. In this case, I'm going to say do not restart. At that point, I'm going to hit remediate. And you can see here, it immediately shows me an operational status. In RTM, we will be showing you, you know the progress indicator var that's in 2008? This will be in here, so it will be supplementing. So you won't ever actually have to go to the jobs view unless you want the detailed information. But because we want the detailed information, we want to see how this cluster orchestration is going to work, I just want to show you what the jobs view consists of. This jobs view is going, this is going to fail. That's why. So it's going to start maintenance mode. It's going to go to the first node in this cluster. It's going to start maintenance mode. And we talked about what that does. Then it's going to install the updates. It's going to reboot if you told us to allow it to reboot. It's going to start, it's going to do a scan to make sure that it's compliant with what you told us to do. And actually it's succeeding, which is really cool. It's going to start, and afterwards it's going to stop maintenance mode. And then it's going to move to the second node in the cluster, migrate off the workload, and do the same thing over and over again. So do you guys want to see the time-lapse video? Okay. This is a time-lapse video. And you can see here I'm just replicating the same operations I did in the live video. And I'm showing you that this cluster is, we're going to remediate this cluster. And I'm going to select remediation. I'm going to let it bring itself up to date. And I'm just showing you here that I can be very granular, which is the same thing I just did. And we'll speed this up a little bit. You can see here that the cluster orchestration job is running. And I'm going to time lapse it, which means I'm going to stop and start streaming. So you'll be able to watch the whole process go through. And you can see here that it's starting maintenance mode. It's going to go to cluster node 2 first. And then you can see the jobs are already pending for node 1 and node 2. And you can see that the VMs that are on that are live migrating off. And actually you can't see it because it happens so fast. But that's what I'm showing you in that. So as soon as it gets through this, it's time-lapsing, it's stopping maintenance mode. It's going to move to the second node in the cluster, and it's going to do the same job over again. Let's time-lapse it forward. At this point, you can see that the host status is updating. And I'm showing you in the fabric mode how it puts it into maintenance mode. You can actually see it reflected in the UI. Today, you have to go into the fabric view to see it, the fabric show to see it put in maintenance mode, to actually see the wording. But we made a change so that you'll be able to see that in the compliance view as well, so you won't have to switch between the two. In VMM 2008, we used to have this little handy-dandy key icon that showed that it was having maintenance done on it. And for some reason, that's not there right now, so we're adding that back in. And you see now I've time-lapsed it, and we're on the third node in the cluster. And if you go back into the fabric view, which I'll show you here in just a second, not the VMs. Oh, it's showing you right here that, see, it's moving the VMs around for you. And it's on node 3, and all the nodes were on node 1 or node 2. All the VMs were on node 1 or 2. And you can see here that now I can actually see that it's on the 3rd node, but it's finished node 1 and node 2, and it's completely compliant with the policy that you've set. And once it finishes up, we'll time lapse it again. We'll move it forward. It takes a while to bring things in and out of maintenance mode just simply because of the live migration. And you can see here that the job is finishing up. It's moving it out of maintenance mode. And all the nodes are complete. And we're in the fabric view, and everything is compliant. I want to show you that. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I like it. Let me switch back to the demo. We've got 4 minutes left, and then I'm going to take all the questions you want to. I'll stay here as long as you guys want and answer questions. Dynamic optimization. So after we're done patching the cluster, dynamic optimization will kick in. Let's talk about real quick what DO does as compared to, in VMM 2008, we had a feature called Pro. And it relied on System Center Operations Manager. In VMM 2012, this is an in-the-box solution that does not rely on Operations Manager. Yeah. And also, we are making changes that enable us. So this will enable me in Pro, the way we did when a resource identified itself as being not playing well, right? Either memory consumption or whatever, CPU consumption, we moved the resource around with Pro. We sent an alert up to Mom. Mom then reacted through Pro, and it was sort of a delayed experience. And it didn't take the entire cluster into account. It didn't say, let me look at my cluster and decide a plan for my entire cluster. With dynamic optimization, we're completely in the box solution. We can respond to those requests because we have all the data within VMM. And so what we do is we actually, using our intelligent placement, we actually make a plan for the cluster. So what would happen in the old case is that you move a VM from one node to the other, and all of a sudden you create this ping-ponging effect where you just have all these migrations going around. And I know a competitive product of ours also has the same issue, where you're constantly ping-ponging the VMs around. This won't happen in VMM 2012 because we actually take a snapshot of the cluster. We figure out a placement map, and we take into account the entire cluster. So it's a brand new feature, and you can actually tune it to your specific needs based upon CPU, memory, I/O. But the value add for us in patching is that it will automatically balance that cluster out to the optimal configuration once we're done patching it. And I think I went through this. It has 2 modes, default and automatic. Automatic, if it's set to automatic, it'll balance the cluster out, and it'll check itself. I think the default is every 10 minutes it does a check, but you can actually set it to manual mode if you want to be in maximum control and trigger it yourself. And at any time, even if it's set in manual mode or automatic mode, you can always kick off an on-demand action if you wish. On top of this is what it looks like in the console. You enable that at the host group level, not the individual resource level. It's at the host group. Another feature that's built in with dynamic optimization is power optimization. Power optimization will basically using intelligent placement, we will power on, power off hosts based upon windows you tell us and usage specifications that you define. So by default, if PO, power op DO is set to automatic, you can then enable power optimization, and we'll always try to do power optimization. But then you can go in and actually set windows and tell us when you would like us to power optimize. And we will actually power on and power off hosts for you. The requirement of power optimization is that you do have to have a BMC on each server so that we can enable the power on and power off of the servers. No, it does not. It's a standalone. Oh, you mean does it kick in maintenance mode on the machines? And we are making changes to enable that. And there's what the scheduling looks like by default. We will always, power optimization is always turned on, and it'll do what it needs to do. But if you block it out, you can say, don't power optimize during these windows. So hopefully today you now understand how to create a cluster, you now understand to patch that cluster, and you understand how to use dynamic optimization and power optimization. Don't forget about the community evaluation program. I know this is repeat. I just want to thank you guys for sticking it out with me. I know it's the last session of the day. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your feedback. And thank you, and I hope you enjoyed Tech Ed.